This is a small showcase of the Krita AI Diffusion extension. It's not really a full guide, but more like an example of what you can do with it. You can get this extension from the link in the description. I recommend searching for setup guides here on YouTube. Although the setup itself is simple, it can also get a bit more involved depending on certain factors. The main benefit of using Krita over other stable diffusion user interfaces is that you can draw directly there and use all its tools instead of going back and forth between your art program and the other user interface. Another benefit is that the parameters you need to adjust are more simplified and easier to understand compared to the more complex options you can tweak in other user interfaces. One downside is that, well, it's Krita. You might already be used to other art programs, and having to learn a new one and get used to its particularities can take a while. In that case, you can also just go back and forth between your main art program and Krita by simply copying and pasting layers or saving your files and opening them in both programs. Clip Studio Paint can be a bit weird when copying and pasting from Krita, though, so you might have to paste to another art program first, then copy from that. It might be better to export to PSD in between programs instead, if that's more convenient for you. The alternative, of course, is also just learning and adapting to Krita. It already has a couple of options that change around the user interface and stuff like keyboard shortcuts to be closer to other common art programs. Here's a generation done with a regular anime model called Mamiji Mix, downloaded from Civitai. Note that the colors look a bit washed out due to the OBS capture, but look fine without it. Here's a generation done with one of my models, which is a merge of a couple of my older LoRAs trained on my stuff and a couple of third-party helper LoRAs that improve the style. For full disclosure, some of those LoRAs are stuff like sharpening LoRAs, general technique LoRAs like watercolors, and yes, a couple of LoRAs from some of my art influences merged at very low strengths like 0.15. Next is a generation using my latest LoRA, trained on all my stuff made from 2009 up until early this year. It understandably tends to converge more on my cartoonier style, but overall it's useful for all my style variations. You can see some of my older stuff here and compare the style of the generated image to my stuff from years ago. This full image is linked in the description below. Training LoRA on your own works is really important, as it will help the AI stick much closer to your own style and the way you draw in general. It can also help you visualize things that you might have never drawn before and that weren't even in your dataset used to train that LoRA. Here I'm generating vehicles, animals, and males on stream, none of which I've ever drawn, yet they're still made in my style. Training on my own stuff is also what made me realize that the anti-AI collage argument makes no sense. Again, you can see all my old stuff in the link in the description. It's the dataset I used to train this LoRA. Just like with regular stable diffusion user interfaces like Automatic 1111, there are two main ways in which you can use AI to enhance your workflow. The first is by enhancing your regular drawings. We can start with a sketch. You can make your sketch as detailed or as sketchy as you want before using AI on it. Once you're okay with your sketch at that point, turn down the strength slider and the AI image generation panel from the Krita extension down on the bottom right, or wherever you chose to anchor it to. The higher the percentage, the more the image will change, and the lower the percentage, the less it will change. Here I used 50%, and you can see how much it changed over the sketch. Even though it changed considerably, it still kept most of its features like composition, pose, colors, clothing, and overall silhouette. There's an observable improvement on details. However, there's also a non-trivial change on the style. Here I am adding my latest LoRA to the prompt and generating again with the same strength. You can see it's much better at keeping the simpler and cartoonier style of the sketch. From here, you can simply start manually drawing again over the generation, tweaking and fixing whatever you consider is necessary. You can reduce the strength slider to better keep the details you manually added as you go, instead of the AI trying to change them too much. You can also increase the strength slider further and let the AI take over as much as you want to, which might be better to bring out more details if that's your creative intention. Here you can see what it does at 60%. From here, it's just a matter of going between your own manual drawing and the refine process until you're happy with the results. The refine process will better blend in your manual changes in the overall picture. This means, for example, lines made with a sketchier brush won't look out of place and will look like they were made with the same brush as the entire image. You can, of course, keep going as much as you want until that vision you have in your head is fully realized. In this case, for this example, this is good enough for now. Next is manually drawing with live mode. The difference from the previous example is that you can see almost real-time feedback on what you're drawing and how the AI is improving it or completing it. This real-time feedback will depend on the speed of your graphics card. The faster the card, the closer it will be to true real-time. The settings and amount of steps that in them will also impact this speed. Once you're okay with your sketch at that point, then you can press the Send to Canvas button and then continue manually drawing from there. The rest of the process isn't that different from the previous example. You can continue making manual changes as needed and then press Send to Canvas. You can also adjust the strength slider as before. Here, you can see what 60% looks like, and then send to Canvas if that's the result you wish to work on and continue to draw on. Just like before, you can keep going as long as you want and add as many details and changes as needed until you realize your vision. As an example, this is good enough for now. The second way is to start from a full generation, preferably using your own model and LoRA. For this example, I'm using one of my models without my latest LoRA. The goal is to start from a generation that's as close enough to what you already have in your head and what you want to make. It doesn't have to fully match it, as you ultimately have the power to change it as much as you want. In the first part of this example, I'm just adding a couple of small details, as well as quickly fixing some AI quirks and inconsistencies. Same as before, it's a back and forth between your own manual additions and the refine button and its strength slider. In this second part of the example, you can see how you can change as much as you want from the generation instead of just minor details. Here I'm changing the hair, part of the pose, and the clothes. Same as with the first sketch, your changes can be sketchy or more detailed. However, the more detailed, understandably, the better they tend to be more coherently improved upon by the AI. From here, it's the same as before again, back and forth between manual work and AI until you realize your vision. For smaller details, I recommend going to Image and Resize Canvas and using a higher resolution. This way the AI can better work on these smaller parts. By default, I recommend starting with a 1024 by 1024 canvas and work up from there. Note it also doesn't have to be a square resolution. It can be any aspect ratio you want. Anything above 2048 by 2048 tends to understandably start to be really slow. Of course, this also depends on the amount of video memory your graphics card has, although the plugin has some memory tweaks for lower cards. Once you're happy with your image, you can use the built-in Upscaler function to increase its resolution and detail. This is similar to Waifu 2X if you've heard of it, but more advanced. You can pick the upscaler model of your choice. Here I'm using the Animesharp model I downloaded from a link in the description. You can also refine this upscale, which can help remove some of the artifacts that some upscalers tend to add to an image. Here I'm doing it at 20%. And here's the result. Hopefully you can see how sharp the lines are and the higher resolution of the image. Of course, from here you can further refine details if you want. However, since the image will be considerably larger after an upscale, the refine process will also take considerably longer. In this case, the refine process took way too long and never completed, most likely due to OBS also using the graphics card, so I just canceled it. For this reason, I recommend using the upscale function only as the very last step of your image and then manually fixing artifacts without further refining. If you really must make bigger changes you might have identified, then you can also simply resize back the image to a more manageable resolution. Just like before, this example is good enough for now, but you can keep going as long as you consider necessary. And that's it. Hopefully you can have an idea of what you can accomplish as an artist with full creative control while enhancing your workflow with AI. And this is just scratching the surface. AI is truly based. Give it a chance. It's not stealing. The models don't contain any images. It's truly learning, hence the machine learning name. For proper settings and setup, I recommend looking up better and more detailed setup guides here on YouTube. This was just a small showcase without wanting to get too technical. I also recommend looking up guides about general stable diffusion concepts like checkpoints, LoRAs, and VAEs. You can find some of these in my previous PDF guide for stable diffusion, also linked in the description. Here's a bit of an overview of the settings you can change. Most of these are self-explanatory, but you can copy most of these settings if you want, replacing in your own checkpoints, positive and negative prompts, and additional settings. Again, some of these concepts are explained in my PDF guide and in better guides. The most important setting I recommend changing is this one under interface. Setting new seed after apply for live mode to on will help reduce artifacts and over-sharpening that can appear when using the same seed over and over. You can also change additional settings with this button and add or remove control nets. Well, this tutorial doesn't use any, and I found that overall, my method with Krita doesn't need them compared to Automatic 1111, which is still worth learning about. I go over some of them in my past PDF guide, and they work mostly the same. Just like on my previous video, also in the description, I recommend doing color correction on your image to remove the color tinting that tends to appear after multiple refined passes. You can do this directly in Krita using its multiple sliders and additional plugins like Gmig or in an external program. In my case, I use PaintShop Pro because it's easier and faster for me, but you can use whichever method you find best for yourself. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.